Hey, welcome to the channel. Glad you were able to tune in. Just getting the channel going. So, pre-E3, what is it, end of May, May 28th. E3 is less than 2 weeks away. And a lot of talk about next generation of consoles, the next generation of gaming. PlayStation 5, of course, is a hot topic. Almost daily, there are new leaks, supposed leaks, and new information coming out. So, a lot to talk about, lots to digest there. And I'm probably going to split and do several videos talking about what we know about the PlayStation 5, but next generation Sony gaming system. But for now, I'm just going to kind of go and give like my initial impressions of the system based on what has been officially confirmed by Sony, and also some of the stuff that we're hearing about in leaks. So there's been a ton of leaks in the past few months, really dating back to like last fall, like around last September. And of course, some of you may know Sony, courtesy of Mark Cerny, who is the lead system architect for the PlayStation 4 and now the PlayStation 5. He's the mastermind. He's the guy that designed the box in and out, and he did a hell of a job with PlayStation 4, as we see. He did a great job with PlayStation 4, as we see. So, only it's reasonable to expect that he will do a equally good job on the PlayStation 5. We shall see. But he's a super smart guy, one of the smartest guys in our industry. Excited to think about what he could come up with. And yeah, he gave a exclusive interview with Wired.com, where he answered some questions and kind of put out there some official information. A lot of that kind of confirmed what we had been hearing about in a lot of the leaks prior to that. Despite there being so many leaks, there were several consistent threads in a lot of those leaks. So some of that stuff has not been confirmed yet, but it's interesting looking back at the leaks now that so much has been confirmed and kind of saying, wow, I wonder if this other stuff is true. All right. We'll know more soon enough. E3 is definitely going to have a lot more discussion about next gen, probably more so with Microsoft's side. Again, they were kind of blindsided by Sony coming out with that Wired interview back in April, and they have a lot more to share about their next Xbox. So they'll talk about it almost certainly at their press conference. I will be there. I will be at E3 for at least part of it, and I should be at the press conferences as well for Microsoft and Bethesda, hopefully. So, exciting time of year, basically. So, it's a lot of false information coming out there now in terms of the leaks with the PlayStation 5, to the point where now it's like there's a new leak every day, and a lot of it is just trolling. It's just people putting out ridiculous stuff. Developers, or so-called developers, dropping, their impressions of the dev kit and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of it is false, so it's hard to decipher. But so you got to be careful. But from what we've been hearing, everything seems really good, really good. System seems like it's almost a dream system. It does what the PlayStation 4 did well. It focuses on that and continues to do that, but then it also addresses a lot of the faults with the PlayStation 4 and tries to fix them. And while learning from all of the mistakes, especially with the PlayStation 3 in the past, and really using cutting edge technology across the board to build a system that is, built for the future, right? That is really built to last, the next, 7 to 10 years or so. Usually when something sounds too good to be true, it is in this space, especially with gaming. It sounds really expensive. It sounds, again, super powerful. It sounds like everything that we can hope for in a system that's going to be coming out in 2020. But I'm cautiously optimistic. I do think that a lot of the stuff that we're hearing is going to be true. But we'll see how much. But I think it still would be an impressive box. It will be better than PlayStation 4 in terms of what it can deliver at launch. I think it has the potential to be Sony's best system in terms of what the system itself is doing. Sales, of course, remains to be seen. But PlayStation 4 is a monster success. Almost 100 million units sold right now. It's probably going to end up being top 3 highest selling systems of all time, which is amazing. And yeah, based on that success, they have a lot of expectation, a lot to live up to. So I don't think they're going to drop the ball. I think, again, Mark Cerny is a mastermind genius. He knows what he's doing. They have a lot more money and resources now than they did with PlayStation 4 as well, so they can actually invest more and build a more powerful box and potentially take a loss. So that's also good. But anyway, just also wanted to say that the dev kits are, dev kit specs can change. A lot of the leaks have been revolving around the dev kits, right? So dev kits are typically given to developers 2 years before the system comes out, around 2 years, and they'll keep updating them as the silicon, the hardware that's going to be in the final system gets closer and closer to release. They'll update the dev kits with specs that are closer to the final box. So a lot of times the dev kits are way bigger and actually way more powerful in a way, because they're not constrained by cost, form factor, having to be a certain size, having to generate a certain amount of heat, that you would have to have in that final box that has to sit in someone's living room, right? So those dev kits are typically, several times the cost of the final box, what the final box will be. And they're usually a lot bigger, especially the early ones. So yeah, it's possible that a leak could have came out in December based on the dev kit specs that changed, by now, right? Right, or by this coming December. It doesn't mean that the leak was wrong. It just means that again, it's just different timing. So this is something to be aware of. There's a lot of information, and just deciphering through it all is pretty tricky. But we do have some official numbers and and some good idea of what to be expected. So my overall impression of PlayStation 5 comes down to three key things. One, exciting. Two, powerful. And three, expensive. Right? So those are the three key words that I think of, my way to describe my impression of the PlayStation 5 from what we heard so far. So exciting. Definitely exciting. We're talking about, the latest and greatest high-end specs, which is something that Sony really hasn't pushed since PlayStation 3. PlayStation 4, even at launch, even when, before it launched, when they were just talking about the specs, it wasn't cutting edge. It wasn't, matching anywhere near matching, what was the latest and greatest video game hardware available at the time. And historically, console, that's always been the promise. It's in your living room, so obviously it's going to be cheaper and so forth, but the promise has always been like, this is, they're going to be able to deliver games you've never seen before, right? We heard that with PlayStation 2 and the Emotion engine. We heard that with PlayStation 3 and the Cell and Blu-ray and all that stuff. PlayStation 4 was like, yeah, it's a PC. It's x86, it's supercharged, but it was using components that even at the time when they announced it, the PlayStation 4, the hardware components were already like a year old. So by the time it came out, it was almost 2 years old, and it showed. They tried, but their main goal was just to get the transition over to x86 and kind of basically build their system based on PC components so that they can make development easier. That was the key principle of PlayStation 4. So now, next gen, they want to really revolutionize gaming for the next 10 years. We'll see. And it shows. So what we know, they're using AMD hardware again. They have an AMD CPU and AMD GPU, but these components are AMD's absolute latest and greatest technologies, right? The CPU has been confirmed to be a Ryzen 3, third generation Ryzen Zen2, 8-core, 16-thread CPU. That's huge. PlayStation 4 has 8 cores, but not 16 threads. But of course, per core, you can expect. Zen 2. We're gonna find out soon enough. They just announced, officially announced Zen 2 at Computex, like literally yesterday. So there's gonna be some benchmark and stuff like that coming out definitely over the next few weeks. But speculation says that the Zen 2 core is easily gonna be, at least 4 to 5 times, raw power, compared to what the Jaguar cores are in the current PlayStation 4. That's kind of really high level speculation. There's a lot more that goes into like computing and something like that, and of course we'll be able to see some real world benchmarks soon enough. But needless to say, it's going to be a huge jump in CPU power and even more multi-threading capability with the 16 threads. So awesome stuff, right? State-of-the-art stuff. Zen 2 is the latest architecture. It looks to basically finally win the battle versus Intel, especially in terms of value, like performance per watt and performance per dollar. Man, it's exciting. It's pretty cool that they have that. Navi is the GPU. So Navi is AMD's new next generation GPU architecture. Keep in mind, there is no components at all right now in the end of May that exists with this technology. I mean, this is their latest and greatest technology, built on the latest processor node, 7 nanometers. And the GPU side of things is supposed to be a brand new architecture. And they didn't talk officially about like how much power will be in there. They just said it will be a custom Navi. But the leaks that have already been confirmed in other aspects have been pointing to anywhere from a 12 teraflop to 14 teraflop GPU. And for those that don't know, a teraflop is just a metric that just tries to describe the raw computing power of a chip. So teraflop stands for trillion floating operations per second. So it's a measure of just how many operations that chip can do per second. That probably doesn't mean much, but put that in perspective. AMD's current absolute highest end graphics card that they built today is called the Radeon 7, and is based on the Vega architecture, which is their current flagship, their current state of the art, but it's actually like 3 years old. But it can do about 13 teraflops roughly. So we're talking 12 to 14. So again, even at 12, consoles are a lot more efficient. Dedicated gaming machines, you can utilize a lot more of the actual hardware than you can on a PC. So you never see 13 teraflops on that card on a PC for a myriad of reasons. But on a console, you can be a lot more efficient because developers know they're working with just one graphics card. So that's exciting. That is really exciting because basically, again, especially if it hits 14 teraflops or even 13 in the middle. You got to remember that this is their new architecture, which, as they just announced yesterday, they talked about Navi at Computex, and they didn't go into details, a whole lot of details, but they did throw some numbers out, and basically saying, for example, that it's going to be 25% more efficient, meaning that at the same clock speed compared to Vega, you're going to get 25% more performance, right? That's important, right? That's huge. And then you have the capability to increase the clock speed quite dramatically. And even with that, basically they talked about it being about 50% more power efficient, meaning, you can achieve the same amount of power that you can get for Vega, but in 50% of the actual power, meaning like the electricity that has to go through the chip and the heat that's generated from it. That's important, right? Because you can't have too much heat coming out of your console. No one wants that. And you need a huge, loud fan to keep it cool, right? So, you can't just have infinite power, right? It all generates heat. It also dictates the size of the chip, the size of the board. So you want to, with a console, you got to have form factor restrictions and size restrictions and stuff like that. So this stuff is really important, especially for consoles. You're not going to have some huge PC tower, right? You're going to want to have a nice size box that's super quiet, ideally. So all of that plays into how much power and technology and performance can you get in a smallest amount of space with the least amount of heat, and requires the least amount of cooling, right? That's the console, hardware manufacturing dilemma. And so that all bodes well. 50% more power efficient means that they can increase the size of the chip. They could add more technology, but the power envelope could still be less than what it was in a PlayStation 4. Right? That's pretty cool. So anyway, 12 to 14 teraflops is pretty darn good. That would basically put the power pretty close to the highest end GPU that is available today. Again, it would kind of come close to matching, if not matching, AMD's Radeon 7, and it would probably wind up being close to the RTX 2080 on NVIDIA side, if you're familiar with that. Somewhere between the 2070 and 2080, probably not matching the 2080 Ti. That would be pretty hard to do. But yeah, a 2080 in a dedicated closed console box like that, where developers can really go to town. Just look at what developers are doing now with the PlayStation 4 still. Some of the later games. If you really look at Days Gone, we just saw last year Spider-Man, Detroit, God of War. Those are some of the best looking games, period, in existence today. And yes, for comparison's sake, the PlayStation 4 GPU is only 1.8 teraflops. 1.8. So we're talking about, possibly jumping up to 12 to 14 we're talking about anywhere from a 6 to 8 times increase in the GPU. I mean, this is awesome. And again, that's it. That's top of the line pretty much, right? So, you know, exciting to look at. They also talk about the GPU and graphics being capable of ray tracing, basically having some kind of ray trace hardware as being a part of the GPU. Now, for those that don't know, ray tracing is a fundamentally different way to render graphics. It has to do with tracing. In code, you simulate light rays as they travel through the scene to calculate how light interacts with different objects. That's the technical jargon. That basically means it's the holy grail of graphics. Honestly, ray tracing isn't new. Ray tracing has been in existence since the 60s and 70s, but it's always been so expensive that it's just been the holy grail of trying to achieve for, like, especially for game graphics, because it's the most accurate representation we can do in the world in terms of simulating the real world in computer graphics, right? The level of accuracy you can get with things like shadows, reflections, stuff like that is second to none. It's way better than what we've been using for the last couple of decades, which is a really gross approximation of these real world things that we see in our environment in terms of how light interacts with things. Ray tracing is the truth, literally. It's the truth. But it's been super, super, super expensive computationally, where for years it was just like, yeah, well, we don't even know when, it's 10 years off before we'll ever see ray tracing in an actual, like, real-time video game, because it's so expensive. Well, recently Nvidia, is trying to buck that trend, and their latest RTX graphics card that just came out, last year, has been touting real-time ray tracing, and yeah, it can do it. It can do some versions of it. What happens now is kind of like a hybrid approach. So there's some real-time ray tracing, meaning that it's used in conjunction with traditional rasterization. So basically, they ray trace only certain aspects of the scene, not the entire scene. Okay, and that's just because, again, it's too expensive to do the whole scene still. But it can, do a lot of great things in terms of making things like the global illumination, lighting, and shadows and reflections look way, way better and much more true to life. And that's what we're seeing. But it's only a handful of games right now, and it's still really expensive, even on the PC side. So it remains to be seen how that looks on the console, on the PlayStation 5, and the next Xbox. But it is promising that they have it and that they're already talking about it and saying, look, we're going to have this as a standard feature day one. That means that developers can take advantage of it. They can make use of it because it is, actually accelerated in hardware. And it gives them more reason to try to actually support it with more games. Super, high-end stuff. I mean, again, 20, 30 years ago, we just wondered, would we ever see ray trace games kind of thing. And in a way, here it is, right? At least the first steps of it, right? So that's really cool. So super powerful graphics, high-end graphics, 6 to 8 increase there. CPU side, we're probably looking at least a 5x increase in terms of raw CPU power. And that's important because the CPU has been by far the biggest limiting factor with the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One this generation. Because the CPU did not see a relatively big jump at all coming from the 360 and the PS3. The graphics increased quite a bit. The memory increased quite a bit. The CPU didn't really change. Didn't really increase that much in terms of raw power. So that meant, if you really look closely, that a lot of the things that CPU does in terms of contributing to the game world, the simulation aspect, the physics aspects, simulation meaning like things like wind and the density of the crowd in the open world, the density of people, stuff like that, were pretty limited and actually really, really similar to what we saw last gen. If you look, Grand Theft Auto 5 was developed initially for the PlayStation 3 and 360, and it came out for those systems, and it then later released on the PlayStation 4, and really all we saw was the graphics improved, the textures improved, the resolution improved. One final thing I wanted to talk about is regarding the memory with the PlayStation 5. We don't really know about the memory in the PlayStation 5. They didn't say anything about it, but the leaks have been suggesting that we're looking at probably 24 gigs in the system. 32 gigs is the absolute max we'll see. I don't think we'll see that because 32 gigs is just going to be too expensive. 24 24 by any standard now and even next year is considered to be a lot. You know, most systems, you know, gaming systems will have 16 now. 24 is still a lot, right? So I think that's the sweet spot. I think it's going to be more than 16 though, because 16 is only 2 times more than what we have on the PlayStation 4, right? With the 8 gigabytes on the PlayStation 4. And remember, the Xbox One X has 12, so it's not even double that. You're talking about a system that's supposed to last at least the next 5 years. 16 gigs is not going to cut it. They need more than 16. I think that Sony gets that. You know, they memory. You never can have too much memory. You never can have enough memory. And memory is always one of the main things that developers want with the next generation of systems, which is why Sony did good in terms of really pushing memory for the PlayStation 4. And 16 gigs not going to cut it. And I really want to make sure to get this across to everyone. No matter what happens, the next generation is going to be the smallest jump we've ever seen when it comes to memory. Okay, let's backtrack. Every single generation, particularly within the PlayStation lineage, every single generation has seen a 16x increase in RAM and memory. Every single one. This will be the first one where that has not happened. Let's review. PlayStation 1 had 2 megabytes. PlayStation 2 had 32 megabytes. PlayStation 3 had 512 megabytes. And PlayStation 4 had 8 gigabytes. You go back and do the math, and that's a 16x increase every single time like clockwork. And here we are in 2019, 2020. And yeah, the diminishing returns and just the relative slow progression in terms of pricing for memory. We're hitting a wall, right? That's what that shows. And 24 gigs is only 3x, only 3x. 16x every single generation before. We're probably only going to see 3x. And again, absolute best case is 32. That's only 4x. You know, man, it's kind of crazy when you think about it. You know, but to dig a little deeper, how this really works is the 8 gigabytes on the PlayStation 4. Out of that, 3 of the gigabytes are reserved for the operating system to do all of the stuff that you do in the system. When you go to the store, when you download in games, when it's running the dynamic theme in the background, all of that kind of stuff. The live streaming that you need to do, the video recording that it does in the background, that's operating system stuff, and they already reserve 3 gigabytes because it needs to do a lot of stuff. So developers, when they built the PlayStation 4 game, they only ever can really program for 5 gigabytes. So every PlayStation 4 game was limited by 5 gigabytes. So essentially, it's going to play the same way in next gen. If you have a 24 gig system, a portion of it's going to be reserved for the operating system. Let's just say 4 gigabytes. Give it a little bit more than what we see now, which may make sense. And then you have 20 gigabytes available for the developers. Well, so 5 to 20 is more of a 4x increase, which again, that's probably about as good as it's going to get. I mean, if they did 32 gigs, it probably would be more like 5x, but 4 to 5x is about as good as it's going to get. That's still reasonable to, that we'll see some, definitely improvements next gen, but it won't be anywhere near what we've seen before when it comes to RAM. So just wanted to point that out. It's important. And people have been saying, oh yeah, 6 gigabytes is probably what it's going to be. Anything above that is just too much. 16 gigabytes is nothing. They got to do more than that. There's no point in coming out with a next-gen system that's only twice the RAM. There's no point. And this will be the first time in history that's ever happened. 3x is already kind of like, but again, by today's standards, that's reasonable. It's going to be more than 16 gigs. You can mark my words. It's probably going to be 24. I've been saying this now for months, actually, on different forums and stuff. So it probably is going to be 24 gigs. Definitely going to be more than 16 gigs. 32 is the absolute max, but again, I really don't see that. It's possible that the dev kits are 32 gigs, and I think we've heard rumors already saying that, and that could be true. But the final box is probably going to be 24, I think. Yeah. So we'll see. Either way, still a nice increase along with everything else. It should be good, but I just wanted to point that out in terms of the RAM. But that's all for this video. Thanks for listening. If you listened to this whole thing, really appreciate it. Remember to subscribe to the channel, please. A comment, I want to hear from you guys. I want to engage with you guys. So let me know what you think. Till next time, take care.